This week on Cinematic Sound Radio, we celebrate Halloween with our 2017 Halloween special featuring music from horror sequels. On the program today, you'll hear selections from Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, Psycho 2, Scream 2, Species 2, Jeepers Creepers 2, and Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth. My name is Eric Woods. Thank you very much for joining me. Sit back, kick up your feet, and relax as Cinematic Sound Radio begins now.
On the air and streaming on the web since 1996, this is Cinematic Sound.
From Kitchener, Ontario, Canada, you're listening to Cinematic Sound Radio, the show dedicated to the music of film, television, and video games. I'm Eric Woods. Hello to all of our listeners at WROCK Radio, cinematicsound.net, and through iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Casts, TuneIn, Google Play, or wherever great podcasts are found. It's great to have you on board. And if you're listening to this program on iTunes, please take the time to rate and review the show. It really helps get the show noticed. So welcome to our annual Halloween special, and today we're looking at horror movie sequels and the music that accompanies them. First up, we're going to hear music from Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, released in 1982, directed by Tommy Lee Wallace. Now, the film really isn't a sequel to the first two Halloween films, which featured Michael Myers as the masked killer. What this third film was actually attempting to do was create a Halloween anthology of movies. Every year, a new film was supposed to be released under the Halloween banner, but would be new stories with none of them featuring Michael Myers. Actually, Carpenter and co-writer of the original Halloween, Deborah Hill, agreed to produce the new Halloween film as long as it wasn't a direct sequel to the original. Instead of the film being a slasher film, Halloween 3 told a bizarre tale of witchcraft with some science fiction elements. Unfortunately, the film flopped, and then the anthology idea was scrapped, and Michael Myers was brought back in 1988 for Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. Even though the critics hated the movie, and the audiences at the time were incredibly disappointed in a Halloween film without Michael Myers, the film has actually gone on to become a cult classic. Scoring the film was John Carpenter and Alan Howarth, who worked on the first two Halloween films. The score was composed for and performed entirely on synthesizers. The main theme for Halloween 3 evokes the spirit of the original Halloween theme, a classic theme, but it's not quite the memorable theme you remember. The closest it really comes to being that recognizable theme that you all know and love is in a fantastic pulsating cue inspired by Vangelis called Chariots of Pumpkins. The score is familiar but different. Howarth and Carpenter take the Halloween music in creative new directions. Sometimes the music makes you wonder if some of the cues were actually rejected cuts or ideas from the first two films. In any case, it's a delightful listen, and it's arguably the best Halloween score next to the original. Here now, music from Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, with music composed and performed by John Carpenter and Alan Howarth. Music from Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, with music composed and performed by John Carpenter and Alan Howarth, and the complete score was released by AHI Records.
You're listening to the film, television, and video game music radio show, Cinematic Sound.
Welcome back to the program. This is our annual Halloween special. Up next is music from Psycho 2, released in 1983, directed by Richard Franklin. This was his first film after moving to the United States from Australia. After Psycho 2, Franklin would go on to direct Cloak and Dagger, Link, and FX2 before moving back to Australia. He directed a few more movies before dying of prostate cancer in 2007 at the age of 59. Psycho 2, surprisingly, is a really good movie and a wonderful character study of Anthony Perkins' Norman Bates character, who, after spending 22 years in a mental institution for the murders in Alfred Hitchcock's original classic, he is then set free and returns to his house and the Bates Motel in an attempt to live a normal life, but his past continues to haunt him. The film was a critical and financial success, opening in at number 2 in June of 1983, just behind Return of the Jedi. Jerry Goldsmith was no stranger to the genre, having written a wealth of horror-themed scores in his youth, crafting a mysterious, menacing, yet sympathetic score for Psycho 2. The score is highlighted by the film's main theme for Norman, a theme that Goldsmith said was full of innocence and sympathy. With the film having you guessing who the murderer was, Goldsmith wanted to make sure he tried to mislead the audience and keep them guessing until the end of the picture, making Norman a victim too. Goldsmith was always a creative genius, always looking for ways to introduce new sounds into his musical lexicon. Think of the ram's horn in Planet of the Apes, the weird meowing in Gremlins, ricocheting bullets in The Burbs, or a wind machine in the Blue Max. In Psycho 2, Goldsmith used the whooshing, hissing, or slashing sounds for the murders in the film, along with the sounds of knives sharpening. Wonderfully creative writing from one of film music's greatest legends. Here now, Psycho 2, with music composed by Jerry Goldsmith. Music from Psycho 2 with music composed and conducted by Jerry Goldsmith, and the original soundtrack recording was released in complete form back in 2016 from Entrada Records.
The home for film, television, and video game music since 1996, this is Cinematic Sound.
Welcome back to our annual Halloween special. I'm Eric Woods. Up next is music from Wes Craven's Scream 2, which was released in 1997, only a year after the original 1996 smash hit. The film started shooting in July of 1997, but somewhere along the line, the script was actually leaked on the internet, revealing the identities of the film's killers and plot. The production actually decided to continue with a partial script, while writer Kevin Williamson rewrote the script, changing much of the film's ending and identities of the film's killers and various other plot points. The film was shot, edited, and released within 6 months. The film takes place a year after the events of the first film. Sidney Prescott is now attending Windsor College, but a copycat ghost-faced killer is on the loose. Music for the sequel was composed by Marco Beltrami, who provided his groundbreaking music for the 1996 original. Beltrami's score for the sequel was massive, hugely over the top like the film. Much of it was written in the same vein as the first film score, with a few bizarre choices made by the producers. First, Danny Elfman was actually brought on board to write the music for Sidney's play within the movie, and then the temp track theme for the character Dewey, played by David Arquette, was actually left in the picture. Instead of Beltrami's original theme for the character, in its place was Hans Zimmer's Broken Arrow, which was left in from the temp track. Beltrami, at the time, was furious at these decisions, but eventually simmered down. On top of the large orchestral score, Beltrami complemented the orchestral music with a wide range of original sampled sounds, electronic elements, and synthesizers. While critics found the score eerily unsettling, Beltrami actually thinks the score is a bit on the fun side. Here now, music from Scream 2, with music composed and conducted by Marco Beltrami, and the original soundtrack recording was released in deluxe edition form through Varese Saraband Records.
and streaming on the web since 1996, this is Cinematic Sound.
Welcome back to the program. This is Cinematic Sound Radio's annual Halloween special. I'm Eric Woods. Thank you very much for joining me. Hope you're enjoying today's program. Up next is music from the 1998 sequel to Species, called Species 2. Species 2 was directed by Peter Medic, with Natasha Henstridge returning, this time playing Eve, a clone of Syl, who was the alien running amok in the first film. In this movie, an astronaut is infected by an extraterrestrial virus during a mission to Mars, causing the deaths of many women upon his return. To stop him, scientists who created the human extraterrestrial hybrid Syl in the original Species try using a more docile clone of hers, Eve, to stop the madness. Unlike the first film, which is a tantalizing, fun, dumb science fiction film, this sequel is the pits. A few things, however, were pretty impressive. The special effects were pretty good, especially some of the live action effects work and creature designs, and of course, Edward Shearmur's large-scale score. Shearmur had worked with director Medic before on a few projects, so it was a natural choice for Edward Shearmur to work on Species 2. Shearmur's initial reaction was to score the film utilizing as many electronics as possible. Medic, however, wanted more orchestral music, so it was agreed upon to utilize both. This was Edward Shearmur's first horror score, and it's a fantastic effort. Like Jerry Goldsmith did with Norman Bates' character in Psycho 2, Shearmur wanted the music for Eve to be more sympathetic to help give the character a bit more depth. The other aspect of film scoring that Edward Shearmur had never encountered before was action scoring. This was the very first film that Shearmur wrote an action cue, and as we know, he's bloody good at it. All in all, Shearmur wrote about an hour and 15 minutes of music, 30 of which was released on album. Here now, music from Species 2, released in 1998, with music composed and conducted by Edward Shearmur. music from Species 2, with music composed and conducted by Edward Shearmur, and the original soundtrack recording was released on TVT Records.
On the air and streaming on the web since 1996, this is Cinematic Sound.
Welcome back to the program. Up next is music from the 2003 horror film Jeepers Creepers 2, directed and written by Victor Salva. The movie's a sequel to the earlier film, Jeepers Creepers. The film set a few days actually after the original. A championship basketball team's bus is attacked by the Creeper, a winged, flesh-eating terror, on the last day of his 23-day feeding frenzy. The score for the film was by Bennett Salvay. Salvay's name may not be a household name, but his themes have been heard in millions of households around the world. If you remember some of the more popular sitcoms in the 1990s, then you've heard Salvay's music. With partner Jesse Frederick, Salvay composed theme tunes and underscore for Full House, Family Matters, Perfect Strangers, and many others. Most of the time, Salvay would be working on 6 television shows at the same time. Wanting to explore a different style of music, Salvay moved away from TV sitcoms and worked in independent film. Soon, he scored Jeepers Creepers, and then eventually the sequel. A bigger budget for the sequel meant a bigger budget for the score. While the first score was based more on atmosphere and ambience to set the tone, Salvay's score for the sequel is injected with complex, colorful, large-scale orchestral writing that leans towards big action music. Here now is Bennett Salvay's entertaining music from Jeepers Creepers 2. Music from Jeepers Creepers 2, with original score composed and conducted by Bennett Salvay, and the original soundtrack recording was released on WROCK Band Records. We've sadly come to the end of yet another edition of Cinematic Sound Radio. Thanks to everyone at WROCK Radio for helping me get this show on the WROCK Radio airwaves. Check them out at WROCKradio.com. Feel free to reach out to Cinematic Sound Radio by emailing me at cinematicsound@yahoo.com. Don't forget to visit cinematicsound.net to hear an archive version of this show and years of previous programming as well. And plus, we have a whole host of other Halloween shows on the site as well. So check us out. We're also on iTunes. I also want to thank Tim Burton for lending us his voice for all the bumpers and stingers you hear throughout the program. And of course, composer David Coscina for writing Cinematic Sound Radio's intro music. Our last score comes from the third film in the HELLRAISER film series, called HELLRAISER 3, Hell on Earth, released in 1992, which was directed by Anthony Hickox, and was the first Miramax release under its Dimension Films banner. There is a lot of heavy metal rock music in the film, and the original score was actually meant to have a more rock feel to it. But that idea was soon discarded, and Randy Miller was brought in to provide a more traditional Gothic score in the style of the first two scores in the series, composed by Christopher Young. Miller had a very short time to compose and record the score. The score was actually recorded in Moscow with the Mosfilm State Orchestra and Chorus. From what I can remember, Miller's score was chopped up quite a bit in the movie, and needle-drop cues from Young's original scores were inserted into the movie. It's quite unfortunate, but what are you going to do? But thanks to GMP Crescendo Records in 1992, they released a generous amount of Miller's incredible score for your enjoyment. This is what a good sequel score should do. Take the already existing material from the previous films, respectfully integrate it into the new score, while at the same time surrounding those established themes and motifs with dynamic music that gives the new score an identity of its own, but is still respectful to the original material. Randy Miller's Gothic score is enormous. While Miller does utilize Young's original HELLRAISER themes numerous times throughout the score's playing time, Miller did in fact write his own theme, which I think is just as good as Young's. The rest of the score is meaty, haunting, over-the-top orchestral choral goodness. I think you're going to love this, folks, and it's a great way to end off the program. That's it, folks. Thank you very much for tuning in. My name is Eric Woods, and I've been your host for the past 2 hours of film music. I really hope you enjoyed today's show. And now, music from HELLRAISER 3, Hell on Earth, with the original soundtrack recording, originally released on GMP Crescendo Records. Until next time, take care, and happy Halloween! All right. For those people who listen right to the very end of the show, here is a bonus cue from a horror movie sequel. The film is Friday the 13th Part 4, The Final Chapter, released in 1984. The score for the film was composed by Harry Manfredini. And this is the massive 11-minute finale cue from the film. The soundtrack was released as part of a massive box set featuring music by Manfredini from all parts 1 through till 6 on La La Land Records. Enjoy. thank you for listening to Cinematic Sound Radio. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please email us at cinematicsound@yahoo.com. Don't forget to check us out at Cinematic Sound Radio at cinematicsound.net on the web, CinSound Radio on Twitter, and Cinematic Sound on Facebook. And if you listen to us on iTunes, why don't you take a moment right now and rate the show and write a brief review. All reviews help us get noticed on iTunes. And don't forget to tell all your friends about the program as well. Share this show on your favorite social media network. We really appreciate all the support. And don't forget to check out our affiliate at WROCK Radio at WROCKRadio.com.